Well, we're on the floor of the Barossa Valley. This place is a very old vineyard site, which is a viticultural jewel. And this is the 1889 block that we call our tricentenary block. And you know, you can't create these jewels with a whim anymore. This is history. This is not a place for an accountant to visit. We've got to keep the financial people away from this. These are very low yielding. I mean, it's very wide spacing.
You're really looking at around about 350 odd vines to the acre, which is not a lot. We would be averaging probably 1.5 to 2 tonne to the acre, but for younger trellis vineyards, it'd be cropping at 3 to 4 tonne. This is one of the ancient treasures. It's, as you can see, it's split in half, it's that old. Over the years, it hasn't been as well looked after, and we've spent a lot of time in our time of owning the vineyard, getting it back into a reasonable shape. But these are so old that they've spread out and they've actually collapsed. But they're still growing, even though they look as though they're falling apart.
By definition, a bush vine is a vine doesn't have to be growing on its own roots, but there's no wire trellis. So it's literally a plant, like a rose, actually, sitting on its own in the soil, growing fruit.
The trellis would be up around this height, and whereas these were only ever this high, and as they've grown, these arms have grown outwards, and this has become the main trunks. And we're getting arms coming off those main trunks. So it's very much lower and back-breaking work.
As with a lot of the very oldest vines in the Barossa, Shiraz, Mataro, Tokai, these are planted for fortifieds. That's why they're here. They're old because they're good, not good because they're old. The reason this block has prevailed throughout 126 years is because they have grown grapes that end up making beautiful wine. We can't say the wine makes itself, but with these old blocks they've been producing year on year for so long, you really just let them go and express themselves.
Grenache is all about the fruit, and I mean, we don't make our wines to be black. A lot of people make a really dark, brooding Grenache style. Ours are generally a little bit lighter in colour, but not in flavour. The framework of the wine is fruit-driven, but good fruit concentration through the palate. So, I used to work for somebody many years ago who'd put his wines up to a glass, and he said, up to a light, and he'd say, well, I can't see through that, so it must be a good wine. Those sort of days are over. Dark colour doesn't mean best wine. You're looking for fruit, concentration, acid and tannin and flavour. So it doesn't have to be dark colour. And my comparison is always what I think are the greatest wines in the world are the wines of Burgundy. And the best Burgundies are sometimes the lightest colour, but they've got the most flavour and they've got the best staying power. So colour doesn't mean everything.
This is the old planting at 550 vines per acre. So there's 5,500 vines in here.
And you prune them individually?
Yep. My father has pruned these by himself leading up till me. And I wasn't allowed to prune until at least age of 25. I had to watch, and I thought he was mad, but he was 100% right, because if you load up the spurs to go one direction or too much growth goes one side, they'll lean and fall and break. So every cut that you make now takes 2 years to recover. So the benefit of old vine is the consistency. So whatever the weather throws at them, they just know what to do. They've seen 167 different summers, they've seen 167 different winters. They know how to self-regulate, and that's what's beautiful about them. I guess some younger Grenache blocks can be a bit boiled lolly candy style, real sweet, crunchy, whereas this tends to give you that more tannin, grippy, nice long length in the palate. So this is all about that beautiful, bright, vibrant, pretty fruit. These barrels here are probably nearing 85, 86 years of age this year. So we're not looking for a huge amount of oak flavour or intervention. This is more just really a maturing vessel, allowing the wine to sort of micro-oxidisation through the pores of the wood, and I believe in the old method where it's not about the oak, it's all about the vineyard. And I guess it's a very similar situation to Pinot Noir in the fact that you don't need to overwork them. It's about the prettiness and the beautiful tannins that the fruit gives you.
Well, we're standing in the middle of the great terraced Grenache vineyard here at Seppeltsfield Wines. I think for me, working in this vineyard, to me it's really interesting to see the gradation down the terrace slope of the types of quality and style of Grenache that is produced. So up here we do tend to get smaller berries, deeper colour, richer flavour and more tannins, so better suited to a table wine that may see maturation in old oak. As we move down the hill and the crop gets slightly heavier and the berries get slightly bigger, there's less tannin, and that's when we move into the territory where it's better to select fruit for tawnies. (1878) is when Benno Seppelt finished building the new winery, and to celebrate that milestone he laid down a barrel of his best port and decreed it was not to be touched for 100 years. And indeed that's what happened. So in 1978 that port was released as a 100-year-old tawny port. Every year subsequent to 1878 port was laid down to be released at 100 years old. So here in this cellar we have an unbroken line of tawny port from 1878, and we've just put the 2015 into barrel. So we're in front of the barrel of 1946 tawny. And you just see glorious toffee and amber colours. These wines are a blend of Shiraz and Grenache. Shiraz contributes the robustness, but even at 100 years old you can see the aromatic notes of the Grenache in the tawny wines.
Which is bizarre looking back. You know, it was a very difficult time. Growers were getting less for their grapes than ever, and it was uneconomic really for them to be managing their vineyards. The government put a pool of money aside for people who wanted voluntarily to grub their vineyard.
But many growers, and some of them at the encouragement of some of the better known brands and wineries in the Barossa Valley, did retain some of their old vines. And today we realise how special those old vines are, their provenance and their age and their importance to the history of the Barossa Valley.
So we're lucky to still have them.
We are indeed, yes.
You know, the drinking history, and these are irreplaceable. We look after them. They don't all have names, but I'm sure KG and the vineyard team, they know them individually, how they perform and how we have to look after them to preserve them. People want to still refer to us as New World, but our geologies and our vineyards are some of the oldest in the world.
Hopefully these continue to bear fruit for my lifetime and hopefully my children's lifetime. So I don't think I'll stop seeing them produce. It'll be me that stops before these guys.